Darren here. Been meaning to revisit the topic of music gear again for a while now, so this is that again. In this video, I'm looking at a dozen pedals, a dozen or so players that tell the story of guitar effects through the 90s. One person's opinion, clearly, but this is how I remember it, from the perspective of someone who was immersed in the Indian alternative music of the day, and at the same time trying to get a band up and running. So this will touch on everything from cost and availability to technology and the changes in musical tastes and sounds of the day. Not dwelling too long on any one particular thing today, focusing instead on the narratives, the big pictures, and how that all kind of rolled up to make the 90s an important decade for guitar effects. So the 80s ticking over into the 90s, gear culture, I guess, was still lagging behind pop culture, behind music culture, by, I think, quite a margin. Pedals, guitars, all the advertising and imagery associated with them was still aimed squarely at the rock, the metal, the blues players, meaning you had to look past an awful lot of things to figure them out. You know, you had to get your hands on them to get to grips with them. A perfect example at number one on this list being the Dodd American Metal. That's the FX56 pedal. Yeah, on the surface, a garish kind of pinky purple brick, you know, that colour absolutely screams, glam or hair metal at you. So surprising maybe that this pedal is the source of that kind of wheezing buzzsaw eruption of noise that David Pajo summoned during the explosive sections of Good Morning Captain and Nosferatu Man on Slid's landmark Spiderland album. The pedal itself is a modded circuit of another contemporary pedal, namely the Boss HM2. That one was aimed squarely at the more extreme metal sounds of the day. The American Metal was produced from 1984 to 1990, so its dying days coinciding rather nicely, I think, with the Spiderland recording sessions in the summer of 1990. Yeah, these pedals were cheap, they were widely available in regular guitar stores, and I think there's something oddly fitting about the pedal's demise coinciding with the arrival of a strange sound a million miles away from metal. A theme will emerge already here too. We can't just view, a single decade in isolation. Guitarists didn't, troop to the shops to routinely buy the latest and greatest pedals on release day. Often they had to rely on older, used, cheaper gear, that was a few years old. And the next two pedals on this list kind of illustrate this, I think. Yeah, digital delay in a compact stompbox format was an entirely 80s innovation. The Boss DD2 being the first one back in 1983, 84. But here, at number two, I'll highlight the Digitech PDS 1002, which debuted in 1987. This was part of Digitech's PDS line. I think that was professional dual switching. This one cropped up on the boards of some very cool bands in the early and mid-90s. Yeah, here's the Justin Trosper of Unwound rocking one. And although I can't find a photo documenting this, I do know that Jeff Muller of Shipping News used one extensively as well. Yeah, briefly, a bit techy, a digital delay just has a higher fidelity. It reproduces the original sound with much more clarity when compared to an analog or a tape delay. And I think for bands like Unwound and Shipping News, at this time both kind of a three-piece, a trio format, that is a big plus. Yeah, there are no other guitarists that you have to work around or off. And playing kind of more intricate, structured stuff, mathier stuff, that signature 2 seconds of delay, quite a lot for the technology of the day, that the Digitech brings, it was a powerful creative and compositional tool. At number 3 on the list, I've got another digital delay. This time it's the Ibanez DL10, which was made between 1988 and 1993. Yeah, the player I'd focus here would be Alan Sparhawk of Low. He used it for the band's first couple of albums. Only 400 milliseconds of delay at a max with the Ibanez, but used by Alan as more of a kind of an echo or reverb-like effect. The DL10 really benefits by having stereo outputs. Yeah, Alan's early years rig, circa I Could Live in Hope, Long Division, was super minimal, but he did make use of 2 amps to spread that kind of warm echoed sound across the stereo soundstage. Brief note, common misconception that digital delay is cold sounding. It's precise, yes, but tonally there's nothing in a digital delay that inherently pushes any particular frequency over another. So this cold sounding thing is an entirely kind of psychoacoustic phenomenon. The rich, full sound that Alan was able to summon in that kind of super minimal, spaced out kind of slow motion drama of Low should be enough to convince you of that. A bit of a left field one here at 4 with someone using another piece of, seminal 80s music technology, namely the cassette multitrack or Portastudio in a rather unique way. Yeah, and in case you've never seen one, it's something like this. This is my old Fostex cassette multitracker. But here I'm talking about Brad Lehner of the band Medicine. He liked the sound that you could get by maxing out the input gain on his Yamaha cassette 4-track so much that he managed to integrate it into his live rig. So that means that rather than run that distorted guitar signal to a tape, he fed it back out to his other pedals and his amps, effectively using it just like a big fuzz box. There is a historical precedent for getting this sound in a studio setting. The Beatles, for instance, they overloaded the Abbey Road mixing decks to get the fuzz sound on Revolution, but less so, I think, for using it as a kind of a live in-the-room sound, as Brad did, so kudos to Brad. The sound is kind of biting and raw and trebly and very crispy. You hear it smeared all over that great debut album, Shot Forth Self-Living, and I think it's, over the years, slowly become one of those kind of shoegaze, noise pop staple sounds. Heck, I mean, there are even pedals out there which are designed to mimic the sound of a tape preamp being overloaded to hell. The Mid-Fi Electronics demo tape fuzz would be a great example of this, and boy do I wish I still owned mine. Moving on, one effect type which did, I think, make huge leaps at the very start of the decade was pitch shifting. Digital pitch shifting had been a studio-only concept at the beginning of the 80s, but it slowly found its way into rack effects and ultimately into stomp boxes by the decade's end. The Boss PS2 pitch shifter delay was probably the first pedal in this format, which debuted in about 1987. But a kind of inherent glitchiness did limit its usability. It was essentially monophonic. It couldn't track chords. Everything would kind of degenerate into a mess. Single notes sounded fine though. Yeah, and decent glitch-free polyphonic pitch shifting was still, a good few years away at the start of the 90s. But number 5 on this list, Digitech. They made a huge splash in 1989 with the original Whammy pedal. That's the WH1. And by incorporating a kind of wah-like treadle into the Whammy, that allowed for foot-controlled pitch bending and harmonizing. It was a bit of a game changer. Yeah, the two big 90s users of the Whammy, guys who really, really pushed it into the spotlight, making it maybe, I think, the all-new 90s effect were Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine and Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead. Both of the solos from Killing in the Name and Paranoid Android would not exist without the Digitech Whammy. So this is 100% a case of a step up in guitar technology, really contributing directly to the pop music vocabulary of the day. Yeah, one of those kind of what the hell was that sound moments, a bit like, when people first heard Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, that fuzz tone. And at 6, I've got a pedal that sneakily became a bit of a fixture on the pedal boards of shoegaze acts far and wide. Among them, My Bloody Valentine, Slowdive, Ride, Swerve Driver, and probably a bunch more. Yeah, I'm talking here at 6 about the Boss PN2, a panning tremolo pedal produced by Boss between 1990 and 1995. I guess a lot of people would look to highlight, paint stripping fuzz pedals or cavernous, washy reverbs and echoes when talking about shoegaze, but the stereo panning capabilities of the PN2 made it a no-brainer for guitarists looking to push their signal to 2 amps to widen their sound and to give it a little extra movement in and around the stereo field. Yeah, standard tremolo, which the pedal is capable of, achieves a kind of a throb or a pulse by adjusting the amplitude, the volume of the signal. But a stereo panning tremolo swings the signal back and forth between 2 amps, loud in one, quiet in the other, and vice versa. A very cool sound, and given kind of the boutique treatment Boss has given some of its Wazza craft reissue series over the last, 5-10 years, and the growing even appeal of shoegaze with modern audiences, I'm amazed that we haven't seen a reissued PN2 yet. Yeah, I know people who would pay a premium for a modern kind of tricked out PN2. I just slipped in a word there. That word was boutique, and that was a concept that didn't exist in guitar effects circles until the 1990s. Yet there had long been custom builders, pedal makers to the stars like Roger Mayer or Pete Cornish, but never seemingly a market for premium grade, top-notch, hand-built effects for a wider audience. Maybe it was the growth of the internet, new ways of reaching and selling to people that helped change that. But whatever, the 90s saw the emergence of boutique pedals. Yeah, I'm talking about, people here like Zachary Vex, Mike Fuller, George Trips, Fran Blanche, Devi Ever, Mike Piera. Yeah, these people tended to be kind of tinkerers or modders who just started making their own pedals. And I think the most famous, the most infamous maybe, pedal of this wave, of this generation is the next one up. And surprisingly, I think, its creation has a very strong link to a great alternative guitarist, that guy being Jeff Farina of Karate. So at 7 then, a pedal that remained an entirely hand-built affair from 1994 right up until 2009. I'm talking about the Klon Centaur. An infamous pedal, if only for the fact that this seemingly simple 3-knob overdrive pedal was, at one time, fetching thousands of pounds on the used market. Meticulously designed and engineered by Bill Finnegan in the early part of the decade, the Klon was the first transparent overdrive, basically designed to closely mimic the sound and feel of playing a cranked amplifier at much, much lower volumes. The Klon circuit attained near mythological status by being heavily gooped. It was daubed with a black epoxy resin on the PCB to preserve what was, a wholly original design, stopping it being copied, cloned. And where does Jeff Farina come into this? He met up with Bill Finnegan via a friend back in Karate's early Boston days. That's the early part of the 90s. And he helped out making and assembling some of the very earliest Klon Centaurs. Yeah, Jeff had himself long tinkered with his own equipment, especially his amps. So he was just another useful pair of hands in what was essentially a 2 or 3 man operation at the time. With regard to his playing, yes, he's used a Klon ever since on pretty much every release by Karate. So if you want to know what it sounds like, hit the Karate. It's almost all Klon. I've got another boutique-y number here at number 8 before we return to the more affordable stuff. That is the Lovetone Big Cheese, as played by Stephen Malkmus of Pavement. And I guess Lovetone were the first, certainly the most well-known of the 90s boutique pedal companies that came out of the UK. Yeah, big box enclosures, hinged construction, built like absolute tanks really. They have proved highly influential on the whole pedal design front since they first came out. And the Big Cheese is a cool hybrid fuzz design. It's got elements of a bunch of different circuits kind of all crammed together in a new way. And yeah, very versatile in terms of the sounds that you can get out of it. Yeah, Malkmus was quite an early adopter. So I'd say given the timeline of the pedal, anything post the recording of Wowie Zowie in 95 has a better than average chance of being Big Cheese if it's fuzzy sounding. Yeah, I saw the band tour that album back in 95, 96, but I can't confirm, it was there on his pedal board back then. But he still owns it. He still uses it, as you can see from this photo from 2016. 2 pedals now from a brand that was revived in the mid-90s and helped kind of, I think, bust open the, the little black box aesthetic that had come to define pedals during the 1980s. With maybe the exception of Electro Harmonics, most pedals had stuck with a kind of relatively conservative look and appeal for ages. It was the Boss look, if you like. Modular, color-coded, quite utilitarian, a bit boring maybe. But the revival of Danelectro, initially riding the kind of retro guitar boom wave, the 50s, 60s reissue thing I talked about in one of my earlier videos, that they also heralded a range of affordable pedals that also bucked the kind of modern day trend. So at 9, I've got, literally, yeah, here is one right here. I've got the Danelectro Daddio Overdrive. This range was a big hit. They were cheap, they were sturdy, they were great sounding, and they sported a very retro kind of 50s automotive look that was very appealing and yeah, instantly recognizable. These were never going to be mistaken for a Boss. Yeah, a great user of the Daddy-O, which is essentially a Marshall governor under the hood, was Doug March of Built to Spill. The effect is a cool kind of unruly overdrive with a kind of gritty rasp to it, and a 3-band EQ that, you know, really helps sculpt the final sound. Yet this range of pedals debuted in about 96, 97 maybe so. I guess Doug would have been using this circa the Perfect From Now On and the Keep It Like a Secret albums. And following up quickly at 10, from the same range, there's the Fab Tone Distortion, which found an early and enthusiastic fan in Stuart Braithwaite of Mogwai. Yeah, a massive, unruly kind of buzzsaw sound on this huge low end. And interestingly, I think under the hood, this is, like the Dodd American Metal earlier in this list, a Boss HM2 clone, which I find even more interesting given, you know, the big influence David Payho of Slint had on that early Mogwai sound. It's very cool to see Stuart picking up on that sound and deploying it, despite there being, you know, nothing about the two pedals visually to hint at their shared heritage. Both the Daddy-O and the Fab Tone crop up very cheaply used nowadays, and as someone who used one back in the day, you know, it still works as well. You could do far worse if you're aiming for a 90s alt indie rock sound. Finishing up this list with two final entries, focusing on the other technological breakthrough in effects that rode in on the tail end of the decade, and that was digital modeling. This is pretty much a given nowadays in the world of, you know, ampless rigs and in-ear monitoring, but digital modeling made its first proper appearance in consumer-grade effects in the late 1990s. And the one that really caught the imagination back then, maybe down to the design, I mean, it was an odd-looking thing, was the Line 6 Pod, which made its debut in 1998. Essentially modeling the sound and the response of a bunch of different classic guitar amps and cabs, throwing in a handful of digital effects into the mix for free. You know, the kidney bean, as it was a big hit, particularly with the kind of the home, the silent recording crowd, who were screaming out for some kind of headphone friendly, if you like, amp sounds that wouldn't you know, end up with them being evicted. I did own one myself for a while. I never dreamed of using it live, but not so Colin Newman of Wire, who rocked a kind of stand-mounted one for live shows, probably about either side of the turn of the millennium. I certainly remember seeing Wire at the Shellac curated ATP in 2002, and remember them playing a, you know, a send, read and burn heavy set with Colin using a pod throughout. Yeah, modelling of amps has come on in, you know, leaps and bounds over the 20, 25 years since, but the pod was one of that first wave of, I don't know what you call them, shock troops that kind of shook up the, you know, the valves or die crowd. And another modeler to end this list, debuting in 1999 and remaining in production for the best part of 20 years, as far as I can tell, until the Mark II came out. Again, from Line 6, this is the DL4 Delay. The big green monster, as it was known, yeah, it was everywhere at the smelly end of the 90s, and with very good reason. This pedal could do a lot. Digitally modelled analog and tape delays, multi-tap delays, reverse delays, stereo ping-pong delays. It even had a basic looping function. Plus, tap tempo to allow for, you know, easy on-stage syncing with wayward drummers. And everything it did very, very well. And it also avoided the kind of the, you know, synthetic complaints that had stuck to the pod by virtue of it, you know, it integrated perfectly into your existing rig, you know, valve amps and all, with zero fuss. And cast your mind back to the third player on this list. This was Alan Sparhawk's replacement for that DL10 that he'd been using for a few years. A great unit, and I think its longevity on a lot of players' boards is testament to that. Personally, I never owned one. It was just out of my budget back then. I think the delay world hasn't been quite the same since the DL4. You know, there have always been proper analog and tape-based delays on the market, but the huge range of model delay options available today, from Echoplexes to Echo Rects to oil can delays, is probably down to the success of products like the DL4. And that is an even dozen. Please, before you shout at me in the comments, this list is not meant to represent the greatest 12 pedals of the 90s. These are just 12 examples which, in my opinion, plot some of the trends in the FX world of the 90s. Things like the durability of a lot of classic drive, fuzz, distortion circuits well beyond their origins, the changes in the marketing and the designs of pedals in the 90s to finally reflect a new breed of non-shredder guitarist, plus stepping away from that black box look. Yeah, the technological advances in digital modeling, pitch shifting, all the delay in reverb sounds that became available. And of course, the emergence of that boutique market, high quality, high price effects that just hadn't existed in the pre-internet days. Is there anything I've missed that I would like to cover now? Yeah, how about the Dodd Grunge pedal? It probably deserves a mention as an example of new music, new sounds impacting on the gear world in a big way, even though, in all honesty, it didn't sound very good. The Boss Blues Driver, the BD2, I think that debuted in '95. That was one of the very few, I think, mass-produced all-new drive circuits that came out in the 90s, and a great pedal it is too. A couple of shouts for some other legendary boutique pedals. Yeah, the Way Huge Red Llama, it debuted in '92. It's probably my favourite overdrive of all time. I love it. This lives on my pedal board. It's a Mark II. And another infamous pedal, the crazy, the chaotic, the Zvex Fuzz Factory. It's basically an old fuzz face or a Maestro fuzz circuit, completely deconstructed and then put back together again by a madman. It's incredibly versatile and at the same time almost impossible to control. It's definitely a modern day classic, and it made its debut back in '95. And that's it. Many thanks if you've got this far into the video. I hope you found something interesting or something enjoyable along the way. I'm always a bit unsure about these videos because they fall between talking about music and talking about gear, and I'm kind of worried about them landing in the middle in no man's land. Let me know what you think. Is this something that interests you? But as ever, I would add, if you have enjoyed the video, then please think about giving it a like for me. Give it a thumbs up below. It really does help the video. And yeah, subscribe if you'd like to see more of this kind of content. And that's it. I'll sign off for now. You take care, and bye for now.